You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 12th of September 2024 on Monocle Radio. Hello and a warm welcome to The Briefing, coming to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Emma Nelson, and coming up on today's programme, North Korea fires ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan. We'll examine how close to danger things have come. Also coming up, the crew of Polaris Dawn begins the first stages of Spacewalk. We'll bring you the latest.
Report visors down, ready for secondary O2 flow initiation, and crew is go for Spacewalk.
The business news will come from Bloomberg's Ewan Potts, and Fernando Augusto Pacheco will be here with the global countdown. Where are we going today, Faye?
Hello, Emma. Today is a region. Get ready for the best pop of the Middle East and North Africa.
With some excellent crocheted berets as well. That's all coming up right here on The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. North Korea has fired several ballistic missiles towards the sea, landing in the water between the Korean peninsula and Japan. The exercise follows the announcement by the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un that he will ready his nuclear forces for battle. Meanwhile, 20 allies of the Philippines are meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly session in New York. They're worried that the sheer volume of geopolitical tensions and military spats in the wider region could lead to one small event triggering something much bigger. Well, to tell us more, I'm delighted to say we're joined now by Bill Hayton, Associate Fellow at Chatham House's Asia Pacific Programme. A very good afternoon to you, Bill.
Hi there, Emma.
So if you could just explain to us the nature of these missiles that were fired by the North Koreans. I mean, what were they and what were they intended for?
Well, they are short-range ballistic missiles, so that means they fly something around 350 kilometres or so. So they're not the sort of the major new developments that South Korea has been working on, which it hopes will eventually be able to target the United States. So these are short-range missiles, and we know that South Korea has the capacity to produce these, not least because they are reportedly exporting some of them to Russia, and Russia, according to the Ukrainians, has been using them in its war in Ukraine. So this is very much a kind of for the theatre of it, I suppose. This is them showing that they've got this. It's a means of responding to the political pressure that they're facing. Yeah. And
just looking at the way that the North Koreans are approaching this, I mean, the missiles, were they to have hit a target such as Japan? I mean, how much damage would they have done?
Well, if I understand it correctly, these particular missiles probably can't get quite far enough to hit Japan, but they can pretty much hit everything in South Korea. And so I think their aim is really to send a political message to the South Koreans. Tensions have been rising between the South and the North recently. The North Koreans get very upset when anti-communist groups in the south send balloons over the demilitarized zone to the north containing anti-communist messages. The North have been responding by sending balloons carrying trash to the south. There have been meetings between South Korean and Japanese leaders to discuss all this. So, yeah, the sort of the feeling around relations between South and North is pretty tense at the moment. So we have to see this as part of that.
And placing the firing of these ballistic missiles within that wider context. I mean, this is 2 months since the last major missile firing exercise by the North Koreans. I mean, how frequent or infrequent are these episodes becoming?
They're becoming much more frequent. I mean, there was a period of a sort of, détente would be maybe too strong a word, but a kind of an attempt maybe to rebuild relations. But since the change of president in South Korea, we've had a complete, new approach, really. A South Korean president that is prepared to work more closely with Japan and with the United States, and much more skeptical of talk of peaceful relations or even reunification with the north of North Korea. So yeah, and that coinciding, of course, with the end of the Trump administration, the US, and then Biden sort of more return to standard American foreign policy.
So let's move geographically now to the United States and the fact that at the UN General Assembly session in New York, there has been a meeting of allies within the region who are putting their heads together to express concern that the volume of geopolitical tensions right across the region and these individual military spats that seem to be occurring with regularity and have been doing for years and years and years, the build-up of them could trigger, or one tiny event or small event could trigger something much larger and more dangerous.
Yeah, this is actually something that's expected to happen rather than something that's happened already. So the UN General Assembly is underway, but this meeting has been announced by the Philippines ambassador to the United States. And he talks about at least 20 countries having this meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. It's not clear, I don't think anyone said yet, which 20 countries are due to take part. My guess is that it will be mainly countries from outside the region who want to sort of support the Philippines. So the US, some European countries, Australia. But what will be interesting would see how many Asian countries show up, how many of the Philippines' neighbors turn up. Would a country like India want to be associated with this? I think that'll be a really interesting test of how much support the Philippines has and whether countries are willing to sort of support the Philippines in its confrontation with China in the South China Sea at the moment.
So this is more of a focus on the Philippines and her allies, isn't it? It isn't just the regular problems that occur from North Korea and within that part of the world. This is the Philippines asking for help against whom? Against China? Against China,
yes. So the Philippines and China have been engaged in a number of confrontations, getting really quite dramatic. Ever since, over the past 2 years, really, they've become more intense, leading up to physical, collisions between the Coast Guard ships of the two countries. And of course, the US and the Philippines are treaty allies. So in theory, if the Philippines were to ever find itself in some kind of conflict with China, in theory, the US, might be prepared to or committed to join in, although obviously nobody wants a US-China war. The stakes here are quite high. And when you think about this happening in the South China Sea, and obviously what we've just been talking about happening in East Asia between South and North Korea, then Asia is in a worrying state at the moment. And at the heart of it is a reliance or an expectancy that were something to happen and were something to be triggered, then the US would be the country that everybody looked to. I mean, how much is there a real reliance still on the United States? Well, yes, it's a good point to make, to connect these two, because, we use this word allies rather loosely sometimes, but, the US and South Korea and the US and the Philippines are literally treaty allies of one another, pledged to defend each other. These two crises at the same time are kind of pulling the US's attention in two different directions in Asia, of course, at the same time as Ukraine and the Gaza war are also ongoing. So really, this is, quite a testing time for US foreign policy. And I guess what the Philippines here is trying to do with its idea of organizing this meeting is as much about trying to keep American eyes focused on this region as it is about trying to pressure China. Bill Hayton, thank you so much as ever for joining us on Monocle Radio. The time here in London is 9 minutes past midday. Here's Tom Webb now with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Emma. An Israeli airstrike on a central Gaza school being used as a shelter for displaced Palestinians has killed 18 people, with the UN reporting that 6 of its staff were among the dead. UN Palestinian Refugee Agency says the attack is the highest death toll among its staff in a single incident. Nearly 200 people have died in Vietnam in the aftermath of Typhoon Yagi, and more than 125 are missing due to widespread flash floods and landslides. On Wednesday, the death toll stood at 197, while more than 800 have been injured. And Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party has unveiled the candidates who will run in a September the 27 leadership election. A record 9 candidates kicked off a 15-day election campaign to succeed Fumio Kishida as the party seeks to restore public confidence following a slush fund scandal. Those are the day's news headlines. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. Now, the crew of the Polaris Dawn mission have begun the first stages of their spacewalk from the SpaceX capsule. Let's have a listen.
Everyone looks so calm and collected right now. I think that's a great visualization of just all the extensive training that they've gone through to get to this point. This has been years in the making.
Report visors down, ready for secondary O2 flow initiation, and crew is go for spacewalk.
Right, here we go. So to bring us the latest on that and other aviation news, well, that's space news, I'm joined now by Sally Gethin, who's aviation and space analyst. A very good afternoon to you, Sally.
Good afternoon.
We're covering everything which is not earthbound, as far as I can tell. Yes. So, look, where are we up to with the astronauts and the spacewalk? Has the hatch been opened?
Yes, it has. Very exciting, historic day today. And we've just been seeing coverage of Sarah Gillis, the first female to perform a private citizen spacewalk, so not a qualified astronaut. She followed after Jared Isaacman, who was the first person to do this spacewalk. So, yeah, we've just seen the live footage and, it's just amazing.
It is astonishing because the way that they have conducted this spacewalk or pulled it together is that in order to open the hatch, they have had to, all of them, all four on board SpaceX, have had to effectively let all the air out of the capsule, which some might say would be rather foolhardy. But this is how they've done it before, isn't it, in the past?
Yes, they have. Except, these are actually private citizens doing it, so they don't have all the skill, expertise, and qualifications of, the astronauts usually do on the space station. I think it's hard to comprehend this when you're sitting watching it on the TV because it just looks like normal in a way that they're just moving super slow in this capsule and then going out into the dark, so to speak, outside. But they're really entering a vacuum, and that's really extremely risky because they're wearing these suits which look quite normal, actually. I mean, they're almost comparable to everyday wear, but they're specially designed to be able to protect them from excessive irradiation and also the pressurization and depressurization that comes with changing the air, like you said, with the vacuum in that capsule entering.
And then once they come back in again and they close the door, they have to refill the capsule with oxygen and nitrogen.
Yes.
One would hope, at least. This issue about them being private astronauts and them not being as qualified as the average spacecraft operator, the average astronaut. I mean, what is the skills gap here?
Well, I mean, I don't think you can compare somebody who's, got the deep pockets to be able to afford to do this or create a project like this, and who takes this risk with somebody who's got decades of experience. I mean, a sort of testimony to that is the fact that there are two qualified astronauts with them in that capsule at the same time. So there's four of them basically managing this particular feat. So, yes, of course, they do get extensive training. And I think that my instinct is to, compare myself to these two individuals who are not astronauts. And I have to say that, although I would love to go out into space, that is hugely daunting. And psychologically and physically, you really have to be able to meet that standard, so in terms of fitness, aptitude, I mean, claustrophobia, that's one other aspect to it. And also maybe agoraphobia once you come out of the capsule and you face the great unknown. But, if you look at the coverage, they really are in constant contact with the ground and the control station. So they're not alone, but they look completely tiny and alone.
Let's move on briefly to talk about more sort of earthbound issues. Boeing, with its continued problems, we have the safety of its aircraft and, of course, the reliability of its spacecraft to count as its main issues in the last, 6 to 8 months at least. But we now have the threat, don't we, of workers at Boeing about to go on strike over pay. And it's led to the company's CEO asking staff not to take an industrial action because she says it could put the recovery of the company into jeopardy. I mean, what is this dispute about and what's the likelihood of it happening?
So really, this is a hangover from all the decades of strife and turbulence at Boeing, which sadly led to catastrophic loss of life, particularly in 2018, 2019. So Boeing morphed from being a very aerospace safety-orientated company up to the 90s to being dominated by Wall Street type, city banking type of people that were running the company. And they kind of really ran it into the ground, sadly, in terms of safety, which led to those incidents. Now, many of these workers, the employees at the factory, have come through that transitional phase, and they were not heard or silenced when they raised safety concerns on the shop floor. So this dispute is multiple, really. It's about pay, it's about pensions. It's also about those workers having more say and improving the accountability of safety at Boeing, because obviously they're the ones on the factory floor that can flag up concerns, and they want to have a vested interest in the future of that. But what it's really boiling down now to is it's like a war of attrition. We've got a new CEO, actually, Kelly Ortberg, who's really encouraging and doing a good job. He's only been in the job like a month, really, and he's tasked with steering the company into greater safety and a better relationship with its workers. And he's put a great offer on the table of 25% pay increase to the workers, but they want to stand their ground and ask for 40%. So they're going to vote today, the workers, and the expectation is that they will reject this 25% offer and they will go on strike, which will be herald a bad period for Boeing then, financially, commercially, and trying to rebuild its relationship with its workers again.
Sally Gethin, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. Time now for a roundup of some of the day's biggest news business stories. Ewan Potts is from Bloomberg and joins us on the line. Good afternoon.
Hi, Emma. Nice to speak to you.
Well, good to have you with us to tell us about investors and what their current views are with the US election. Did things change after the Trump-Harris debate?
Yeah, 67 million people in America watched that debate this week. And you can bet that traders and investors were glued to their screens. There's never been agreement over who won these things, but traders widely think that Kamala Harris outperformed, increasing the chances of a Democrat presidency. So there has been something of an unwinding of the so-called Trump trade. Shares in Trump Media, which operates Truth Social and at times kind of traded as a proxy for the former president's election odds, its shares dropped 14% on the day, although they have regained some of those losses. There was also a post-debate move lower in Bitcoin. Former President Trump is these days very pro the cryptocurrency. And green energy shares, solar shares in particular, gained on speculation that the Democrats will bring in more funding for the renewables transition. Of course, importantly for investors, there's also speculation about what all of this could mean for the wider economy and for the dollar. Will Trump's tax cuts lead to more government borrowing, and could that spur inflation? So these are some of the big questions being thought of by investors. But I think the problem for longer-term investors is not just that the race is close and we genuinely don't know who's going to win, but neither side really has been keen to talk about policy. So we don't really have a clear idea of how either candidate will end up affecting the economy. So if you fancy betting on all of this, all I can say is good luck with all of that.
Absolutely. And it's astonishing to think that actually a bad performance by Donald Trump could wipe, 14%, as you said, off Trump Media?
Yeah, it was a pretty big move. Of course, it is not a massive stock, but it is seen as very sensitive, of course, to the former president's chances of winning. But I think it is very difficult at this point. We often talk about close elections, but I think sometimes they're not as close as they don't turn out as close as the speculation is. But I think at the moment, genuinely, investors are not sure who's going to win. And I don't think we're quite clear on what the policies will mean for the US economy. So there is just so much uncertainty around all of this.
Let's move on to AI, and questions already being asked whether the AI boom may already have peaked.
Yeah, I want to talk about a name which is synonymous with microchips. Anybody who bought a computer back in the 90s or noughties. That is Intel, and it is a company which is really struggling. It's the subject of today's Bloomberg Big Take, which is our deep dive into one subject. It's now heading for its third consecutive year of shrinking sales, but it's really worse than that. Analysts called its latest earnings report its worst ever. Intel was founded back in 1968 in an area which eventually became known as Silicon Valley, and its leadership in the global chip tech race was really absolutely undisputed for decades, but it is no more. It should really be a great time for Intel. The tech giants are spending billions on AI processors, and the US and other governments are handing out massive subsidies to reshore chip production. But the company lagged in the race to produce the particular chips needed to train AI models. And it's really lost that technology leadership that it was so famous for. In fact, it's even been considering outsourcing production of some of its chips. And that's something which would have been completely unthinkable back in its heyday. So there is just a huge amount for management to get to grips with at Intel. And Emma, I'll just leave you with one stat on the company's decline. NVIDIA, the new kid on the AI chip making block, is now worth 34 times as much as Intel.
Ewan Potts, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing. You're with Monocle Radio. The former Peruvian president, Alberto Fujimori, who achieved economic growth during the 1990s but was later jailed for human rights abuses, has died. He was 86. Here with a look back over the controversial Peruvian leader's life is Monocle's Andrew Muller.
Since Alberto Fujimori left Peru's presidency after a cloud of singular thickness in 2000, his country has had an astonishing run of lousy luck where its heads of state are concerned. 2 of Peru's subsequent presidents faced serious corruption charges, one of whom skipped the country to avoid facing justice. One shot himself as Lima's finest prepared to bring him in, one resigned in disgrace after 5 days in the job, one quit in preference to being removed via impeachment, and another was removed via impeachment and further banned from holding office for 10 years after being accused of jumping the COVID-19 vaccine queue. And yet every single one of this extraordinary roll call of ne'er-do-wells, scofflaws and bunglers cleared the low bar set by Alberto Fujimori, as grotesque a scoundrel as has ever been elected a national leader. Alberto Kenya Fujimori Inamoto was born on July 28, 1938 in Lima, the child of Japanese immigrants. Until well into middle age, he seemed to be pursuing a blameless, if not admirable, career in academia. He studied and taught agricultural engineering and mathematics, and by his mid-40s was rector of the National Agrarian University in Lima. In the late 1980s, he began hosting a television program called Concertando, which considered agricultural topics and gave him a public profile. Fujimori leveraged this notoriety into an outsider tilt in 1990's Peruvian elections. To general surprise, Fujimori's own very possibly included, he made it to a second-round runoff in the presidential election against Mario Vargas Llosa, the distinguished novelist and future Nobel Literature Laureate. Fujimori made hay with Vargas Llosa's plans to treat Peru's inflation-plagued economy with a scouring course of austerity and trounced him. 2 weeks after being sworn in, Fujimori imposed more or less exactly the program he had run against. Fuji shock, Peruvians called it, referring to the policies themselves and to the screeching 180-degree skid executed by their new president. Fujimori could at least say that he'd given early warning that Peru would be well advised to buckle up. In 1992, wearied of being thwarted by a resentful and obstructive parliament in which his own party was a minority, Fujimori conducted an effective coup d'etat, suspending Congress and the constitution. The region and the world protested, but the maneuver was vexingly well received among Peruvians. In 1995, they re-elected Fujimori, and it wasn't close. Despite running against the distinguished figure of former UN Secretary-General Javier Pérez de Cuellar, Fujimori won easily in the first round, and Cambio 90 was awarded a handy majority in Congress. Fujimori's popularity at this point was significantly attached to his oversight of the defeat of the pestilential Maoist guerrilla group Shining Path and the capture in 1992 of Abimael Guzman, the philosophy professor and lunatic who had founded Shining Path in the late 1960s and directed the campaign of mayhem it commenced in 1980. During Fujimori's second term, the difference between his rule and the messianic mania of Guzman became steadily harder to spot. Even Fujimori's recently ex-wife, Susanna Higuchi, though perhaps not an altogether unbiased judge, called him a tyrant and a crook. She had threatened to run against him in 1995 until he passed a law against other members of the first family seeking the presidency, a stunt which would later acquire ironic cachet. The constitution Fujimori himself introduced in 1993 limited him to 2 terms. As the 2000 election loomed, he enacted the requisite legislative and judicial shenanigans which permitted him to run again. He won, but only just and in dubious circumstances. Not long subsequently, Peruvian TV broadcast footage of the head of Peru's intelligence service, a key Fujimori consigliere, bribing opposition MPs to join Fujimori's group in Congress. Realizing that the jig was up, Fujimori took advantage of an official visit to Brunei to flee to Japan, from where he faxed his resignation. Congress refused to accept it, preferring to vote him out of office and declare him morally disabled. There, an already bizarre tale might have ended. As a dual Japanese citizen, Fujimori was safe from extradition and appeared to have made provisions for his long-term financial security, would be one way of putting it. He would not be told, however. In 2005, Fujimori chartered a private jet to Chile, hoping to run in Peru's elections in 2006, despite the growing list of charges being prepared against him. Chilean police placed him under house arrest, from where in 2007, possibly to pass the time, Fujimori ran for a seat in Japan's upper house, which he did not win. Chile extradited Fujimori to Peru later that year. In a series of trials, he was convicted of a picturesque slate of charges, including corruption, abuse of power, and overseeing paramilitary death squads responsible for dozens of murders and kidnappings. He was sentenced to rather more time than he had left. A pardon on health grounds, though many suspected a political trade-off, bought him a year or so of freedom before it was overturned by an unsympathetic Supreme Court, who returned Fujimori to the clink. Incredibly, the Fujimori name remained a potent political brand in Peru, as opposed to a scarlet letter. One of Fujimori's daughters, Keiko, leads the Popular Force Party and has fallen narrowly short of winning Peru's presidency 3 times. One of his sons, Kenji, was a congressman before being suspended over accusations of influence peddling, prompting much rumination on how far acorns ever really fall from trees. The lesson about encouraging anti-establishment candidates with their own TV shows to run for the presidency languished unheeded in one key jurisdiction. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
Thank you, Andrew. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. It is time now on The Briefing to go and have a look and have a listen at the world's most interesting music. And who else to ask? Fernando, Augusto, Pacheco with a Global Countdown. Hello, Faye.
A pleasure to be here, and this time to talk about a region, Emma, not a specific country.
Yeah, this is a bit of a quiz, isn't it? What is this? Before telling us who it is this the only region in the world which is a sort of a multinational group of countries, of charts which are sort of mixed up and mashed up together to bring with one single countdown?
From my understanding, yes, that's quite unique because, of course, you have some regional charts or specific charts, but from like a group of countries, I never seen it before, an official one I'm talking about.
So where are we talking about, Faye?
We are talking about the MENA region, which encompasses the Middle East and North African countries. And the reason, I guess, they have their own official chart, I mean, of course, the countries are different, but there are some cultural similarities. So perhaps, if you're big in Egypt, you might be big in the UAE and vice versa as well.
And one would expect a sort of a shared, rather diverse group of different countries and different voices all bringing together for the top 5. It's not quite like that, is it?
Well, It's funny because we're going to start number 5 with Lady Gaga.
Who's not from Mina.
It's not from Mina.
Neither's Bruno Mars.
And neither's Bruno Mars. But you know what? They enjoy a decent ballad. We were talking about this song. There's nothing wrong with this track.
They love a good ballad in Abu Dhabi.
Exactly. Shall we have a listen? And number 5, Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars, Die With A Smile.
Since I survived, I realized wherever you go, that's where I'll follow. Nobody's promised tomorrow, so I'ma love you every night like it's the last night, like it's the last night. If the world...
Go on.
It made me think, Emma, because Lady Gaga, she changed, clearly. We were talking about her. I wonder if her first hits would be big in the region as well, which is conservative, we can
Possibly
say that.
might raise a few more eyebrows.
Exactly, but this time she changed. Now she performs in Las Vegas. She's an actress as well. But that's why maybe she lost some fans but gained new ones as well.
I mean, I'm a bit of a sucker for Bruno Mars, given the fact that sort of everything that he does sort of adds this sort of like almost liquid element to his songs, and you can absolutely see how wherever you are in the world, then a bit of Bruno and a bit of Gaga is going to make you sort of stop in your tracks and go, yeah, this is a good listen. This is a juicy, lovely listen.
I agree. But don't worry, we do have some artists from the region, from the MENA region, and a very interesting one at number 4.
Yes. And again, you were saying that, we would expect a nice big mishmash of different countries. We have this gentleman is... Am I giving the game away?
You're giving away too much.
I'll be quiet.
Too much. I'm joking.
Faye. Where are we going for number 4?
Number 4, an Egyptian artist. He is great. There's so much to talk about him. But let's have a listen first. His name is Too Late, and the song is called Why Don't You Just Come By? Let's have a listen.
حبي زي الشمس وانتي القمر بالليل ما تيجي عدى عليك سيبي كل حاجة بعدين حبيبي فيش وقت كل يوم بيعدي خسارة علينا ده شيء مش عادي من يوم ما شفتك وانتي ما
Delicious track.
I'm so messed up by that one. It's like the Gypsy Kings meets Cairo on a sort of Thursday afternoon. What's happening here? In a moment we have to address what he looks like, which is actually almost more important than what he sounds like. But that's a mishmash again.
And you know why? You mentioned the Gypsy Kings there. This song apparently is a celebration of 90s Egyptian pop. Egyptian is a music powerhouse in the region. All the big pop stars come from there. And this song, even his videos, we're going to talk about it a bit more, they're very nostalgic, even the cinematography of it. So it's also very gentle. But we need to talk about...
you might be over-egging the production values a touch there, Faye.
I always over-egg things. I have this problem. But, let's talk about his looks. He does wear a crochet, kind of mask, balaclava,
yes.
Some would say.
Yes. So everybody, go and have a look at Too Late. I think it's spelled T-U-L, the number 8, T-E. T-U-L, number 8, T-E. You need a couple of minutes by yourself to have a look at this gentleman, because he's obviously positioning himself as quite a bit of the romantic hero, because his videos do have him whizzing around on his moped, leather jacket on, mystical, underneath his girlfriend's window, looking at a large ice cream sundae, playing a CD player. I mean, this is a guy who really looks after his image. The bit that no one can miss is, as you say, he's wearing a balaclava.
Yes.
But it's not a very menacing balaclava. It's a crocheted balaclava, almost as if he'd asked his nan to knit it for him so that he could get in with his girlfriend who, I don't know. It looks as if someone had told him that this girl would really go for him if he wore a balaclava knitted by his nan.
It's a chic balaclava,
It's not chic, Faye.
Well, but there's a charm to it, his leather jacket, he's carrying a rose. I'm going to defend Too Late here,
I'd forgotten about the rose.
Exactly.
I do apologise.
Don't forget the rose.
Never forget the rose.
But there will be more Too Late in the charts.
So a gentleman rocks up on under your window in a kind of Romeo and Juliet sort of thing, and he's on his moped. He's just finished his pizza delivery. He turns up underneath your window, leather jacket, a la 1980s. It's all a bit sort of like, would like to be Tom Cruise in Top Gun. Then he has the single red rose and the crocheted balaclava. Are you opening the door to him, or are you calling the police?
I'm opening the door.
Good man.
Oops. But
Right.
Let's go to number 3. It's another international artist. I'm a big fan. It's Billie Eilish with Birds of a Feather, and there's an interesting story about the song after we listen to this clip.
Birds of a feather, we should stick together. I know I said I'd never think I wasn't better alone. Can't change the weather, might not be forever, but if it's forever, it's even better. And I don't know what.
Another very gentle ballad here, Emma. And you know what I think it's interesting? This time the fans have all the power. This song, which is one of the biggest hits from her latest album, was not meant to be a single. But when the album was released, suddenly fans were more interested in this track than the singles she released, like the song Lunch. And I agree, it's a beautiful track, and it translates to everyone.
There's something quite interesting about Billie Eilish's popularity in the MENA region, given the fact that Billie Eilish is an artist who absolutely goes against female stereotypes. The way she changes her image, the way she plays her with her image, and the way she exhibits profound inner strength, which is inspiring a generation of young women, and actually sort of says you don't need to conform to stereotypes, you can be who you can be. It's an interesting thought that she's actually doing incredibly well in a region which does have quite traditional values.
Agreed. And that's why I like looking at the music charts. It breaks stereotypes. Some people have no idea that those artists would be actually in the top 5 in the country.
Let's go back to breaking stereotypes.
Let's go back to breaking stereotypes. And this is the video where Too Late is having a sundae. I'm not sure if he's eating, because then he would have to remove his balaclava, and he can't really do that.
No,
because
you could give him. You said that you had a straw in your drawer that you'd fly over to Cairo for him.
I would be happy to do that. But let's have a listen to Too Late with My Love. Let's have a listen.
تسألني حاسس بإيه وأكيد في إجابة في دماغي مش حاساها ولا إيه هقولها وإنتي قوليها لي كلمة حبيبي باينة في عينيك.
He found the drum machine in the back of his mum's cupboard.
Beware, I might be adding this to the Monocle playlist.
Okay.
Just so you know. But the interesting thing is he doesn't give interviews. I might send him an interview request, but he's mysterious.
He is.
All the Egyptian press, they're looking, who is actually Too Late? Everybody wants to know the man behind the crochet kind of balaclava, carrying a rose and wearing a leather jacket.
Yeah. Millions of people looking like that. I mean, you indistinguishable from any other human being on earth, sticking out like a sore thumb. And that's Too Late, and that's called Habibi. But Habibi spelled Habeeby in an unusual way. Okay, so Too Late's dominated the charts. Too late for number 1?
It's not too late for number 1, and we're heading to Saudi now. This is another very powerful ballad. I will translate some of the lyrics after we hear this. It's the young singer, he's only 29, Ayad with Lama. Let's have a listen.
لا تغرك كثرة مزوحي وضحكي والله ان قلبي لغيرك ما فتحته ألف مرة جيت لك شايل شعوري وارجع بنفس الشعور.
Ayed, just translate a little bit of that for us, would you please?
By God, I have never opened my heart to anyone but you.
Thank
I came to you.
Sorry, is that the lyrics, or are you just being lovely?
I came to you 1,000 times carrying my feelings. I love Ayed. I'm in a romantic phase, so very good.
I've never known you not in a romantic phase.
Did you enjoy Ayed?
He's all right. He's obviously going at it with his ears back in terms of his declaration of love. A worthy number 1 for Mina, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. You know what? I think Too Late could have been an even worthier winner, but the problem with Too Late is got too many hits, so the love is spread out.
Never too late.
Exactly.
Fernando, Augusto, Pacheco, thank you so much for joining us to bring us the Global Countdown. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producer Hassan Anderson. Our researcher was Sana Germani and our studio manager was Lily Austin. The briefing is back tomorrow at the same time, midday here in London. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.